You ever felt like you wanted to play to your full potential, but you don't know what that is or how to transform to become it? Today, we're going to go through exactly through that, in addition to the mindset shifts that you need to take today. Now, when we start off our full potential, we often think that it's a scary, difficult thing to understand, challenge, and activate on. But there's ultimately one key way that you can understand the best way for you to have success in your full potential. And it's not just success in one area of life. It's not, luck or talent. It's all about manifesting in 5 key areas that we're going to go through. If we ultimately felt stuck, this is why. It's because our mindset has been conditioned to accept limits that aren't even real. And today, we're going to break those limits. How do we know if we're playing to our full potential? It is simply to understand that we are constantly growing and evolving. Now, where we are today is not where we're going to be in a decade, but where we can be in a decade is different than where we are today. So changing our mindset to ultimately feel not stuck, but more empowered and curious of what is to come. The best way that we can go about doing this ultimately is by keeping the promises that we make to ourselves. That ultimately is going to build us confidence, is going to keep us disciplined and hyper-focused, and ultimately will yield more benefit across time. Now, the mindset shifts that you have to have in order to have this sort of progression is growth over fixed mindset. Also, abundance over scarcity type mindset. The next ultimate mindset shift that you need to take is an identity shift. And it's ultimately you seeing yourself as successful before you become it. How you feel, how you interact, how you think, how you even worry, how you plan, things of that nature. And the best way to go about that ultimately is to understand who and what your future self is and does, and then bring that to today. Now, when I was a software co-founder, that's something that I really focused on. What would be the things that they do? Who do they interact with? Why do they do it? How do they plan, etc.? And that really shifted my mindset, which then shifted my thoughts, feelings, and ultimately actions to build that company that we later sold that algorithm with. Now, the last mindset shift is simply going to be action over perfection. Again, the idea of taking action around being our best self is ultimately we worry about what is the right, best, easiest path, and we don't feel ready to actually take action. The other piece to understand is that, at least for myself, the most amazing, incredible, wonderful experiences in my life have come unexpectedly, meaning that I didn't know they were going to happen. And so if I knew that these actions would ultimately become that, that would then be different than what the outcome would be. So keep taking action on things, just like me recording this video. Hey, I'm recording this video. What would come of it? I'm not sure specifically. And those bricks ultimately laid across and creating a brick wall would ultimately create a beautiful picture that we could then look at. If you think beautiful pictures are brick walls, you would be correct to know that that's ultimately how life is. It's a bunch of small inputs that are put in to create something magnificent. Let's dive into the 5 key areas to ultimately become your best self. The first we talked about is mindset, right? What you think is what you become. So understanding negative self-talk as well as rewiring for your confidence. I would recommend reading a book called Break the Habit of Being Yourself. Ultimately, that really helped me really understand how thoughts and energy and patterns really form so that I could have a better mindset towards being the identity and the other things that we just talked about. Ultimately, I believe mindset is one of the most difficult things to change because it's relative to our experience and our surroundings. The other thing to keep in mind is there was a study done in terms of if we should experience less negative self-talk or we should experience more positive self-talk. Ultimately, the study concluded that we should have less negative self-talk to ultimately reach a more positive level. So as you think about your mindset and your thoughts, constantly think of ways to worry less, be concerned less, etc., so that you can ultimately reach a better baseline and, again, take action, not sure exactly where it would go, but having a good understanding of where it could lead. Next key area is physical health. This is something that oftentimes I've neglected and I've seen others neglected, and ultimately it has really hindered our success. Reason being is that energy fuels success, any energy, including your physical health. A weak body ultimately means weak execution. Are you going to send those 5 more emails, or are you going to kind of turn in for the day, right? Those differences are really going to, again, compound in this brick wall that you're building. So not only exercise, but sleep and nutrition directly impact your potential. And I say this also for someone who's done 75 hard, ended up doing it consecutively for 150 days for different reasons. I've also done the Live Hard program and also done things like Project 50. I wear Whoop today, which ultimately helps track exercise, sleep, nutrition, recovery, stress, things like that. I've previously worn an Apple Watch. I've previously worn an Oura Ring. To me, the Whoop has been the best thing to really track and understand. But ultimately, just with physical health, it's really giving you something hard to do. It's a different thing to do in the day. Also gives you a potential social interaction. But fundamentally, if you are shifting your identity to someone newer, that has more or different things than you have, most certainly they do physical health as a priority above all things. We even look at, for example, CEOs in Fortune 100 companies are traditionally always working out in the morning, and it's a priority for them because they know of how important it is to relax through the day and ultimately keep their health high. Our next section is relationships and the environment that you are in. Your circle is either going to lift you up or hold you back. And so ultimately we want to challenge and well as understand why are the people around us here and who do we want around us? The idea of who has maybe done the thing that we want to do before, who is doing it with me, or who can maybe do it for me. Those different questions of what we're asking could ultimately change who we're surrounded around. Ultimately, as I did 75 hard, one thing I found is that some of the people I was around were really just party weekend friends. And although great people enjoyed being around them, removing alcohol from our friendship ultimately meant there was no friendship. And where I was going in terms of the property portfolio I was building, the oil and gas syndications we were fundraising for, and other business endeavors that I've been pursuing have ultimately separated us more and more. And that natural progression really changed. We can also look at our lives to understand that certain people we know don't serve us and certain people could serve us, but sometimes things just naturally fall apart, and that ultimately is part of growth. So the action step right now is to spend time with one person who inspires you this week. If you ultimately learn who can be around you or should be around you, I believe you'd be better to have a longer trajectory to where you want to go than necessarily if you just go cutting friends, unknowing of how they could help support you or encourage you along the way. See how things naturally progress, but be intentional on your future and see again where people might fall off and keep relationships, friendships, connections, acquaintances, as well as coworkers as they align to your future version of yourself that is your best self. Now we're going to talk about skills and knowledge. There have been times in my life where I've been very in a consumption standpoint, meaning I was reading 10 pages of a nonfiction book a day. I was listening to 1 or 2 podcasts a day. I was going to all these conferences and seminars and things like that. I believe there's certainly a time for that, but ultimately that shouldn't be every time, all the time, meaning that we should be focused on not just reading the entire book per se or the book at all, but really getting the concept of the book and executing. Learning never stops, growth never stops, but we want to continue to read, study, and stay curious, both with who we're meeting, what we're learning, and what we're keeping to then execute on that. So a challenge on that today is to read 10 pages of a book that challenges your thinking specifically. Last section and number 5 is going to be purpose and vision. So without a clear purpose, you're really just going to drift through life. You need to find your why, what excites you, what impact you want to make, etc. Now, how you would go about this is ultimately to have a reflection to understand a number of different aspects of past, present, and potential future, and how that aligns with your lifestyle, your life, and career aspirations, how it aligns with hobbies, travel, things like that. Now, on my website, I have a number of resources, for example, a 3-year vision, as well as a life well lived. Take a look at those to really dive into in depth on understanding not only your why, but also what your purpose and vision is, building a life around that, and then having goals and habits that are ultimately going to align with that. It's the idea of having a 3-year vision, writing the 3 big things that you want to accomplish in that 3-year vision, and then every day do one thing as it relates to one of those things, such that you will make incremental progress along the way. Now, you could do maybe 3 things for one of those things, but ultimately we want to just stick with at least one a day because that would ultimately compound, right? So right now, for example, as I'm building my brand, doing a video like this ultimately aligns with my growth trajectory of in the next decade to ultimately educate and teach people not only just about mindset, but also about their finances and living a well life, stewarding and being gracious, not only with their time, but also their talents and their treasure. Now, I've given you a couple actions on things to do or resources to have. So what is one thing that you are going to do from this video? Let me know in the comments, say it out loud, and ultimately take action on that. There's a number of things you can do, but ultimately, what will you do? That answer to that question is ultimately going to change who you become, how you become it, and when you become it. Your full potential ultimately is the limits and the actions that you place on yourself. And as you uncover more of your potential, you'll realize that you had a lot more, a lot better, a lot more fulfilling and curious, a lot more curious approach to life than you did before. So take an action, use these resources to guide you, and check us out in another video for what you need right now.